Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is part 4 of the vintage air install on the Trans Am. When I was filming part 3, I just kept on going and I didn't properly have a introduction for part 4. So I'm just doing an introduction here and I'll cut away to the actual reassembly of the interior to wrap up the project. So here goes the install portion of the project. Okay, so the insulation is in. I left that corner open because that bolt is where the unit is gonna bolt onto, and then up here I'm gonna mark the location where we have to drill 2 holes for the upper mounts. So let me bring the unit in and hang it from that stud and then see where it will mark. We have to also make sure the thing is perfectly level, front, back, side to side, so it will drain correctly. So now that I have the unit loosely mounted via the rear bracket to the stud on the firewall, now I can get my level and then level the unit front, back, side to side, so I can mark the exact location of the 2 holes for the bracket in the front, and then take the unit out, drill those holes, and then put the unit back in and permanently mount it. Now that I have the 2 holes marked on the inner cowl, we can put the evaporator up there, but before we hang the evaporator, we got to install the 2 heater hoses here, and then the number 6 AC hose here, and then we can put the number 10 here afterwards. So let me get the number 6. So number 6 hose here. Let me get that in, get the 2 heater hoses, and then hang it, and then we'll go from there. So see how it goes. So I got the unit permanently mounted. It's level, and the hoses are terminated. I ended up having to use in the back the lower of the 2 holes on the bracket. The threaded one, although it was easier to install, did not make the unit level, so I had to use the lower one. Had somebody give me a hand and to insert the bolt from the firewall and tighten it. It's good. The hose routing, it's not the best. And on all the instructions, it shows it coming out neatly and routing it. I mean, you can tell it's 3 fingers width from the unit to the wall mounted the plate where it comes out. So especially the number 10 hose, I might end up eventually getting a, before I charge the system, maybe I get a 45 and let this hose come up this way. But in the instructions it shows coming out back and going in. It's just no way. I don't know how they figured that part out, but either way. The other thing I have, my only complaint so far with the vintage air system is this chintzy plate they give you while trying to pull the hoses in place. It's barely visible, but the thing snapped. So I gotta find a way to redo it. Either make like a piece of aluminum plate, or just stuff it with duct seal. It sucks, but it's just one of those things. I wish they made a little stronger plate for that area, but it is what it is. And then they give you this little tape that you have to put in around the number 10 hose end. So that's what I did here, wrapped it around. So it's ready to go. Now I can start doing the hoses. These 2 are for the vents. They go here and on the other side for the defroster vent. So we'll do those, and then we'll do the other ones. And I'll run the harness. for the unit and then start reassembly. So now that the evaporator is installed and I started running the ducts, before I start buttoning everything back up, I took these seats and the carpet front section out and used the rest of my insulation to cover the floorboard in the front part of the car. I might later on get some more and do the back part, but even the back part has a thin layer of insulation on it. So I'm hoping this will help it a little bit more with the heat and sound. So now I'm just going to put the carpet back in and then continue assembling the evaporator unit and put the dash back in. So let's continue on. The other thing we got to do before the carpet is fully up there is, this is the drain, and we need to put a hole in the firewall to run the drain hose outside of the passenger compartment. So I basically lined that up and marked the bottom of the level, the bottom corner, as my point of drill, because it says to locate the spot on the firewall parallel to the drain and then go an inch down. So this should give me roughly an inch or so below the nipple on the evaporator. So I get my drill bit and drill that and run the hose through. It calls for a 5/8 hole. Let's see how we're gonna make that work. I don't have a 5/8 bit. I have a step bit. Let me see if I can get in there. If not, then we'll have to do it from the engine compartment. But I gotta drill the hole first. Okay, the 5/8 hole is drilled on the firewall. Ran the hose out, so that part is done. So now we start the reassembly of the dash, and I've taken the center console out to sort out the wiring between the 8-track and the radio. And I did order from eBay the wiring harness that goes between both of them, because mine was missing. Sorry. However, in order to keep the 8-track, I have to either let the center 2 vents just dangle underneath the dash, or do the factory type AC ducts in the center that usually goes in the dash. On the left side, you have to drill 2 holes for the center vents. I didn't want to damage my original dash, so until I find a good replacement one, I'm gonna just remove the 8-track and use the provided center console vent setup to do it that way. And one day when I find a center dash, I'll cut the 2 holes and make it look like factory AC car and put the 8-track back in. But for now, just gonna remove the 8-track, put the center vent thing, and then reinstall the console and then continue on. So it looks like there's 2 5/16 bolts there on each side and 2 more on top, and the 8-track should just pop out. So let's do that and see what happens. 8-track is out. Underneath the 8-track there are 2 studs that go into these notches here, and then there's a nut underneath each one. And once you take those out, and then you take the screws from here, the rest of it will take these 2, and then these 2, and then you have to finagle it out. It'll come out from here out that way. The one thing I have to say is that thing is heavy. It's probably about 10 pounds maybe, the 8-track. But anyways, continue on. Next thing we have to do is take this bracket out. This thing has to sit in its place here. Has 3 holes, And then this is the housing for the center vent. It goes like this way. Sorry. And it sits here. And then that bracket gets fastened there, and there are 3 holes for self-tapping screws to hold it in place. So let me set this up and see how. Here's the vent setup. That's the bracket that gets. Mine had the 8-track, and the 8-track had those 2 screws. I guess the map pocket, if you had that, wouldn't have those. I don't know, but that's what it said in the instructions, to use the nut and bolt here for the map pocket setup. But either way, now I drilled 2 holes here, screwed those. The middle one is, there's this ridge here so it doesn't go through. So this is set up. Let's flip it over. See how it looks here. So that's the pocket. So now I can put the console in and start running the hoses from here to the evaporator and continue on. So the vents are in. It needs a little persuasion to fit in there, but they're in there. So now I just put it in the car and start running the hoses. So now that the console is back in with the console mounted vents for now, it's time to put the hoses in. I'd already done the defrost vents, and now we do the rest of them. So according to this diagram from Vintage Air, the 2 console mounted vents get 20-inch hoses, and then the driver's side gets 36, and the passenger side gets a 50-inch. So I already cut the hoses, and these are the 2 that are going to go from the evaporator to the back of the vents. So let's go do those and see how they look. One thing I noticed here is the gap between the hose and the adapter in the unit. I gotta figure out if there's a way I can close that gap so it'll be a little more efficient. So I don't know, we'll try. I'll see if I can find something, but for now let's do the other ones. So here's the center louver setup. The front top on the evaporator goes to the passenger side center louver, and the front bottom goes to the driver's side center louver. The back top goes to the passenger side over there, and the back bottom goes to the driver's side. The dash is not in yet, so those stay for now. But this looks like the setup for now. And these hoses are long enough, so if I decide to go to the factory AC dash, there's enough hoses here to reach the dash up top. So for now, those are in. Next is repairing the dash, and while that sets up, start running the wiring harness to the evaporator, and just keep plugging away at it. So we'll continue on. Now that the dash is done and it's ready to go back in the car, there are a couple of things I want to address before I put it back in. One is this 90-degree fitting, which makes the hose come in like this weird angle. Even though it'll work, I just don't like the way it's set up. So I'm gonna cut that. I did buy a 45-degree fitting that I'm gonna put in its place, cut the hose and reroute it so it's gonna look like this. And then run the wiring harness for the whole thing. These two wires, the thick red and white, need to go all the way to a fused battery source. And underneath the steering column, I have an opening that was put in there decades ago when the previous owner had an alarm in it. I had it blocked off. I'm going to take that out and run the wires through there. And then the blue wire is the one that triggers the trinary switch. And then this one goes to the, whatever they call it. You see. Heater control valve out in the engine compartment. So I'll lay those out. And then we have, I think, these are lights. Let's see, the tan dash backlight, and there was another one, and the violet is an ignition source. So run these two, and then it should be it. Then I gotta find a mounting spot for this relay. I don't know, I'll see. Maybe after I put the dash behind it. But either way, I want to lay the wiring harness out before I put the dash back in. So let's get going with that. So I took out the binary switch that came with the kit and installed the trinary switch on the dryer. So the trinary switch has 4 leads coming out of it, 2 blue and 2 black. And the way they're wired is as such. I found this YouTube video by a company called Affordable Street Rods, and the guy does an amazing job explaining it. And you can see here, for some odd reason, the 2 blacks are what go to, one to the head unit on the dash and the other one to the compressor. So this is the blue wire that comes from the compressor. And I have it here. So I'm gonna cut that one and crimp it to one of the blacks. And the other black wire goes to, this is the blue wire that comes from the, I ran from the dash to here. This is as far as the wiring harness went, so I'm gonna crimp to it with my wires. And then one of the blue wires on the trinary switch gets grounded, and the other blue goes to the fan controller. So this is what I have. I crimped the wires on, so the 2 blacks on my harness are what go to the 2 blue wires, and that 1 blue goes to the black wire, just as he has it here, just so I know what's going on. So right now what I'm gonna do is crimp this blue wire that comes from the compressor onto the second black wire on the trinary switch, and then the wiring to the trinary will be complete. Then I can run these 3 wires over to this corner of the car where they'll be going into here. One of them will be grounded, the other one will be the fan controller, and the third one will be the wire that goes to the head unit and the dash. So that's what we're gonna do. So I started running the AC harness through the firewall on the driver's side. There was a hole. I put a grommet and ran this through. Has the blue white to the trinary switch, the 2 whites to the grounds, and the 2 reds that power up the unit. Then I realized I still have to take care of the fan wiring here. It needs an ignition sourced power supply here, and then I wanted to run a manual switch inside the car just in case. So I have to add 2 wires to this harness that came with the vintage air and run all of it through the Firewall. Inside the car, there's the violet and the tan wires that still have to be connected, and the locations for those two I am going to get. So this is the wiring harness diagram for the 74. Over here there's a brown wire, and then there's a gray light that used to go to the original heater controls on the dash. So I'm going to use that brown and tie it to the violet here, and then the tan for the light, I want to take it from that gray wire that brought light to the heater control panel. So that will take care of that. And then 12 volt sourced ignition source, 12 volt in the dash, where these 2 harnesses plugs that are just tied there. Those are optional door locks and rear defogger. I think that the defogger would be an ignition sourced power, and that goes, if I trace it back, it would go to the fuse panel. So I'm just gonna tap off of that wire to the rear defogger. That'll be my 12 volt source for the fan relay. And then the other wire, like I said, I'll just put a switch in the dash someplace, so I can use that as a manual override for the electric fans. So now I'm gonna just add the 2 wires to this harness, and then fish it through the Firewall and run it to the front and terminate them and see how it goes. It's little by little, we're getting there. So as shown in the wiring diagram, this brown wire spliced into the violet wire on the AC harness, and then the tan wire on the AC harness is spliced into the light for the heater control panel. So these 2 wires are done, and then down here at the fuse panel, there's an accessory blade there that was empty. Since this car is a very low option car, that spot was not used. I believe it should be ignition sourced, but I'm not 100% sure. If not, there's another spot above that's empty too for accessory I can use. But either way, the ignition sourced control for the fan controls comes out of there. And also, while I was there, I added the 2nd wire that followed the harness up over the steering wheel and through the console in the armrest. I put in a USB outlet, so nicely hidden there. So someday when this gets finally back on the road and I take long trips, at least I'll have a charging mechanism for my phone. Either way, also the heater control valve. Let's go outside. It's a heater control valve here, and it has a harness, and in there, in the body, Vintage Air provides a plug there for an existing harness that needed to come out. So I fished it through there into the inside of the cabin. So that one is done too. So as of now, all the wiring is done under the dash. Now I can put the dash back in and start the reassembly process. So there's the dash sitting here waiting its turn. Also here, I found this plug with a wire to the front speaker on eBay. So I got it and I used it to build the harness for the radio. The previous owner had it just, I shouldn't say hacked together, but it was not, there was no plug, it was just individual wires going to the back of the radio. So now there's a plug. Now I can start reassembling everything. And then we also did change the 90-degree hose end to a 45 degree, so this hose is better routed to the unit. So let's put the dash in and see how it goes. So I finagled the dash into place. Now the fun part of reassembly starts. So before putting the dash off the hoses, I should have run it to the passenger side. I forgot, so I got to snake it through behind the dash. I don't want to take it out again now, and continue on. So see how it goes. So the dash is back in, and over here I put in these screws to hold the dash in place. There was a leftover from the Talon. Unfortunately, the factory uses these things that screw into the dash pad, and then they stick where that Phillips head is, and there's a nut that holds it in place. There was no way. I just couldn't get the dash in with those things in place, so I tried and I gave up and I just used it. Those screws, there's like 5 of them, I used to hold the dash in place. So now that the dash is secure, I'm gonna start putting all the accessories, the gauge clusters and everything in, and wrap this thing up. On the driver's side, refasten the 2 9/16 nuts holding the steering column on, and then install this metal bracket back on that stiffens the bottom part of the dash. There are 4 half-inch head bolts that hold it in place, and then there's 2 bolts, one here and one on the other side, that need to go over there to hold the dash in place. So we'll continue. Starting to reassemble the dash. That's the blank next to the cigarette lighter, and that's the vintage air controller, and the cable goes through in the back and plugs into the right side plug on the unit underneath the dash. And then there's the hose that goes to the side vent. And because of all the ducting and wiring in the back, the factory glove box no longer works, so Vintage Air gives a smaller glove box to go along with the unit. So I'm gonna see how this one fits, install that, put the cover on, and then the passenger side would be done, and then we can move on to the driver's side and continue reassembling the dash. Glove box and door are in. Remember to put the door first, because the stop can't go through this cutout in the glove box. You gotta put the 4 screws for the door first, then put the glove box. Done. Now we'll move on to the gauge cluster area. This is the driver's side hose adapter. It goes in the vent spot. It will have 2 S clips that comes in the kit. You have to put those on, so it will clip to the dash. The passenger side vent had factory 3 screws that put it in place. So the vintage air kit uses that 3 screws to secure the adapter to the dash, but the driver side doesn't. It has S clips that you gotta put on, and then once those are on, you can just take the factory vent and just push it in. The factory vent goes there. The hoses are done. All the sides are fine. The side, I don't like the way this thing is hanging. There's no room above the steering column. It's got to be underneath it. I might have to zip tie it up top, maybe flatten it here. I don't know. I'll figure something out. But for now, all the hoses are done. I have the gauge cluster and the headlight and wiper switch, and then I can put the engine turd fascia on and the bezels, and it'll be done. Wow. Continuing on the install of the gauges and switches. The light switch is a tight fit. You have to like put it in sideways and then turn it, otherwise it won't fit. But that's on. And then you put this ground strap here. That grounds, that's where the gauge cluster will sit, so the gauge would ground into that one. So I'll just put the screws on, and then the wiper switch goes on top. It shares the bottom screw of the light switch. So just continue on installing this. So light switch, wiper switch on, plugged in and everything. And then I realized that the gauge cluster won't go in with the steering column in its position. So after all that, I gotta drop the steering column again to be able to slide the gauge cluster. So live and learn. I should have remembered when I took it out, it wouldn't come out without the steering wheel dropped. So anyways, let's drop the steering column again so I can slide the gauge cluster in. So the gauge cluster slid in after dropping the steering column. One thing you shouldn't forget is this little plastic piece. I think that brings light from the gauge cluster to the 2 switches here. So you gotta slide it in the slot that's in there. And the way you install it is with the gauge cluster tilted this way towards the switch. You slide the RPM side in first, then push the speedo side in. So this thing will, this plastic piece will ride in. There's this little black button here. It slides behind it. So mine is broken. The tab, it does go around it, but I don't think it's supposed to be that way. But in mine, that's how it slid in. So that slid in. The light and the plug are in. Now I'm gonna try to put the speedo back in its place. So the other thing you have to do while the steering wheel column is dropped, I put it back up and I realized it won't work, is the dash, this thing itself, the steering column has to be dropped for this thing to go in, otherwise it won't. And then when I was taking mine off, these things, the bezels around the gauges popped off. So I'm putting them back in. You can see that notch here corresponds to the notch in the bezel, so you have to line it up and press it in, and it will go, and then it would slide. And here I need 2 hands. I did realize after putting everything back together that the kit comes with this plastic cover for the hose that goes from the unit to the driver's side vent, so it won't hang low. I zip tied it to the steering column, but still, since they give you this, I put that in. Now I'll just put the cover. This is gonna be the manual override switch for the fans. I'll wire those in and they'll be done. There it is, vintage air system installed. Interior is back together. Dash is in. Here's the vintage air control. Everything, the radio, the center vents. I used the console mounted vents that came with the kit. Someday, if I ever find a factory AC dash, I can redo that, but it doesn't matter. After all these months of working on it, I don't want to spend any more time working on it. So next is the rear trunk mounted battery install. Once I get that done, I can take the car to the shop, have the AC system charge, and should work. Fingers crossed. But as far as the install, done. Just like everything else in this channel, pretty much everything I do is the first time I do it. So I learn as I go along. And as I said in one of the videos, guys who've had experience watch this and go like, what the hell is this guy doing? But whatever, it's done. In the engine compartment, dual electric fans are done. Compressor is in, everything's in. The Trinary Switch, so it can control the electric fans, are done. I did end up putting an aftermarket coolant reservoir, because the factory one wouldn't fit with the lines, but that's all right. So everything's in. Now we do the wiring for the battery setup. And it's the junction where the battery used to be. So the only thing left inside the car is to do the manual fan control switch. I mounted it to the bottom of the dash. There was a hole from the previous owner. Put some sort of an alarm key in there, whatever. But I used that hole to put the manual switch. But other than that, we can call this project done. I'll update when the system is charged and the AC is working. But for now, AC system install is done. Thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next time.